Hello and welcome to COS Today, as we bring you Roundtable. The Roundtable segment is presented here every fourth Monday of the month at 7 p.m. We'll be focusing on education and discussion of the topics and challenges we all face as we use the Constitution to save the Constitution. Join us now as we bring you COS Today's Roundtable with our MC, John Ackerman.
Welcome to Convention of States Today Roundtable. I'm your host, John Ackerman, and our topic is how President Trump is restoring common sense. Now, before we jump into that, I just want to take half a minute to recognize the fact that today is Memorial Day, the day on the calendar that we set aside to remember our fallen heroes. More than 1.2 million women and men who have given the last ounce of devotion in service to their country. These people bought our liberty and have protected it now for almost 250 years. And Convention of States exists to continue to protect that liberty and to restore that liberty in many ways that it has been eroded. And that's who we are and why we're here. Now, to the topic, how Trump is restoring common sense. In his second inaugural address on January the 20th, 2025, President Trump said, and I quote, "Today, I will sign a series of historic executive orders. With these actions, we will begin the complete restoration of America and the revolution of common sense. It's all about common sense," close quote. And the very first thing he mentioned was restoring our border security, primarily on the southern border, but it also includes that northern border. And our Convention of States State Director from Missouri, Brett Sterling, is going to talk to us about how Trump is restoring common sense regarding border security. Brett?
Hey, thank you, John. I appreciate that. And thank you for honoring our fallen heroes as well. As you mentioned in Trump's second inaugural address, he mentioned border security at the top, and that was really one of his cornerstone policies of how he got elected in 2016. And the Democrat narrative the last 4 years, or I guess 8 years now, with regards to border security was that we needed comprehensive immigration reform and that our immigration system was somehow broken. And like most of what Democrats have said since Donald Trump descended down the Trump Tower Golden Escalator in 2015, declaring his candidacy for president, this is simply a lie. And we have a few stats here to look at. If Dale could pop up that graph. This is an example, or these are Customs Border Patrol encounters of illegal border crossers across northern and southern border both. And I just wanted to call out just a few things. We'll concentrate on March since we just, or April, since we just finished April. You look at, in April of 2022, there were 262,109 illegal border crossings in that month. That's just 1 month. And you look at, in 2022 total was 2.7 million, almost 2.8 million for the whole entire year. In April of 2023, that number rose to 276,036 for the month of April and 3.2 million for that year. And then in 2024, 247,929 illegal border encounters just in April of 2024 and 2.9 million for the year. So you can see right there, this is completely out of control. Now, a lot of these illegal border crossers were actually let into the country because the Customs Border Patrol in the Biden administration was basically a concierge service or a bellhop for illegal border entries. Well, now you come in to look at April of 2025. Wow, 29,238 illegal border encounters for the Customs Border Patrol in April of 2025. Now, virtually about 10% of what we were having before. Now, illegal border crossings have decreased in excess of 90% a month since President Trump took office in January 20th. So, as we go back and look at, what exactly has changed, we mostly had the same immigration framework. I'm done with that now, Dale. Thank you, sir. We've basically had the same immigration framework since 1965, the Immigration Nationality Act, which is also known as the Hart-Celler Act. And Hart-Celler replaced our traditional quota-based limitation on immigration with a tiered preferential system. And it's interesting to note here that there are no cap on the number of family members admitted each year. This is where the term anchor baby originated. Now, the anchor baby theory is one where a child born within the United States is automatically a U.S. citizen. And this concept was discussed during the committee and floor debates over the Hart-Celler Act, and Ted Kennedy was one of the Act's major advocates, and he completely poo-pooed this idea. He said, this is just made up. This isn't going to happen. And it turns out those claims were 100% correct based upon a flawed interpretation of our 14th Amendment. And this really goes to the heart of where President Trump's immigration policy is. Now, if we look at the Bill of Rights, and the Bill of Rights applied to the federal government's interactions with U.S. citizens. And then after the abolition of slavery, it was clear that some states, mainly run by Democrats, were not going to recognize the rights of the newly freed slaves. So the 14th Amendment was drafted and passed to make the Bill of Rights apply to states, so the rights of newly freed slaves would be protected. We'll read the pertinent part here in dealing with immigration is Section 1. So Section 1 of the 14th Amendment, which was adopted in 1866, post-Civil War, states, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. Now, Senator Jacob Howard from Michigan, he was the author of this section, and he was specifically asked if Section 1 meant that any child born in the United States would be a U.S. citizen. He emphatically said no. He cited the children of foreign diplomats and foreign citizens traveling through the United States as examples where this concept made no sense whatsoever. And we can actually, nowadays, we can add the children of Indian tribes to this list here as well. And whenever the open borders crowd will cite the 14th Amendment, they'll always quote this part of the 14th Amendment. They'll just say all persons born or naturalized in the United States are citizens of the United States. That's what it says. No, it says, and subject to the jurisdiction thereof, the jurisdiction of the United States. That's very, very meaningful. Some people will try to sidestep that. If it didn't mean anything, they wouldn't have included that in the 14th Amendment. So that is very, very critical. And that's what President Trump is using here. Now, the Trump administration is actually enforcing immigration laws that Congress have passed using the constitutional process. And they're also applying the 14th Amendment as it was originally intended. And we'll see, because it's been kind of a mixed bag, we'll see if the courts end up doing the same, if they end up interpreting the 14th Amendment based upon its original intent. Donald Trump, he made the statement that we didn't need new immigration laws. We just needed a new president. It's 100% accurate. So this is very, very critical in a critical interpretation of the Constitution, and we really need to be based in original intent. And President Trump and the Trump administration is interpreting this correctly, in my view, and the view of people like Jacob Howard and other constitutional attorneys. So
yeah,
we'll see how it goes.
Okay, Brett, thanks for that. And we get the chance to see the Supreme Court rule on that, I think, later this year. And I'm looking forward to that with great anticipation. So you've done a good job talking about how Trump is restoring common sense to the border. Now, he actually listed 10 things in that inaugural address, and we only have time to cover 5 of them. And so the second one we're going to talk about is tariffs. And Gary is our financial guru expert, and he's going to talk about how Trump is restoring common sense by using tariffs. Gary, your turn.
Thanks, John. John, I'm going to give a lot of background into how I think what my interpretation is and understanding what Donald Trump is doing and why I think he's doing it. So if we go way back to the end of World War II, England, all of Europe and Japan suffered enormous devastation and destruction. The United States, on the other hand, emerged as the dominant economic power, and we had an intact industrial and manufacturing base. So the United States in 1947 entered into the GATT agreement, General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, with a number of other countries, and we gave very significant help to other nations with favorable trade terms. The United States tolerated other nations imposing trade barriers against the United States because we wanted to strengthen them. We were essentially subsidizing them. In 1957, Europe entered into the agreement to create the European Economic Union, and we ignored violations of GATT, again, to help these nations. And while it was in part a giveaway from our generosity, it was also part of a Cold War strategy to counter the Soviet Union. Then in 1994, the Soviet Union collapsed. GATT was replaced by the World Trade Organization. And each time there are negotiations in the GATT or in the WTO, these negotiations last for several years to get there. In 2001, China was invited to join the World Trade Organization. This had profound effects on the United States and the European Economic Union. Now, it's my understanding that since 2001, some 60,000 U.S. factories have moved out of America and moved to China. So this was a tremendous move of deindustrialization of the United States. We lost millions of manufacturing jobs. And in return, we got cheap consumer goods and the theft of U.S. intellectual property. Who won? Well, obviously China won, but there was another big winner in all of this, and that was Wall Street and U.S. corporations and really the shareholders of those corporations. So if we go back and take the 10-year period in the 1990s, corporate profits in the United States typically were somewhere around $800 billion each year, all through the 90s. Then, after China joined the World Trade Organization between the end of the 90s and the Great Recession, roughly 2008, 2009, these corporate profits in the United States doubled from 800 billion to 1.6 trillion. Then we went through the Great Recession, 08, 09. Then in the period from 2010 to 2019, American corporate profits roughly tripled from where they had been in the 1990s.
Wow.
Then we had COVID hit 2020, and we had all the stimulus. And by 2024, corporate profits in America were about 5.5 times greater than they were in the 1990s. So this was huge boom to shareholders of corporations in America. But what about the workers who worked in the factories and everybody else who works for a living. Well, I'm going to give you some more statistics. We go back to the 1950s and 1960s. In all that period, roughly half of all the income earned in America was earned as wages and salaries. But in the 20 years roughly since China joined the World Trade Organization, the share of income earned by workers has dropped from about 50% to about 43%. You may say, well, that's only a 7% drop. No, that's a 14% drop from 50 to 43. And it would take about a 16.5% boost in everybody's wages and salaries across America to get back to where they were in the 1950s. That's wages and salaries as opposed to rents, capital gains, and dividends. So the earned income, the share of the earned income has gone way down for workers. Who won? Obviously, the wealthiest people. About 10% of the people in America, I'm not a socialist, but these are just the facts. About 10% of the people in America own about 80% of all the stocks and bonds. So they were big winners. And in fact, there were huge concentration. A couple months ago, the Wall Street Journal ran an article in which they estimated that 19 families, not 19,000, not 1,900, 19 families in the United States gained $1 trillion of wealth in one calendar year of 2024. So that's against that backdrop, Donald Trump comes along, and Donald Trump looks at this and says, man, this is all wrong. Now, he could have said, let's send delegates to the other 160 nations we trade with, or let's enter into another multi-year round of talks with the World Trade Organization. That's not how Donald Trump works. Donald Trump dropped a bomb, a common sense bomb, you might say, and he blew all that up with what he called reciprocal tariffs. Now, instead of trying to go to 160 or whatever other nations to negotiate with them, they are all coming to his doorstep saying, hey, we want to renegotiate this trade deal. So this is the common sense art of the deal 2025 by Donald Trump, using tariffs to renegotiate the last really 70 years of unfair trade practices that the United States has put up with.
Wow, Gary, that's quite an eye-opener. I was not aware of all of those statistics. Thank you for sharing them. And I'm not a socialist or a leftist either, but it's no wonder that Bernie Sanders and the others keep saying, tax the wealthy, because they've made trillions just in this century. And I've looked at tax, who's paying the most taxes, and it's the wealthy who are paying the most taxes. I think they're already paying their fair share. But what about the workers? The people like you and me, the six of us on this screen here, we have not realized that kind of income. So these tariffs, it's too soon to know how they're going to work out, but I'm not running around yelling, the sky is falling, the sky is falling. I'm willing to wait and see as common sense takes the driver's seat. So thank you, Gary. Well, viewers and listeners, we're going to take a little break right now. We're going to have another dose of Dave's Daily Dose.
Elon may be on his way back to working at Tesla, but what about the DOGE, Department of Government Efficiency? Will it disappear too? Will it not get headlines like Elon did? Mr. Musk says DOGE is here to stay for a while. He thinks at least until 2029. This is Dave's Daily Dose on Broken Road Radio. I'm David Allen Punt. Whatever happens to DOGE seems to be up in the air. Trump seems to like what they're doing, but the agency has lots of critics, lots of embedded bureaucrats who want to keep their jobs and hang on to the piles of cash to spend how they like with little or no oversight. Hey, that's my money you're tossing around. A piece by Mary Pappenfruss in The Independent said that there's lots of smoke, but she sees not a lot of fire. The writer acknowledges that some 250,000 jobs have been eliminated through firing and buyouts and grants and contracts slashed and burned. But even accepting that DOGE evidence, the writer says the agency may not have cut any waste and fraud, and she says hasn't managed to reduce Trump administration spending. But a Department of the Treasury report released last week said that the folks in charge of executive department spending has reduced the amount of cash it will need next month. Meanwhile, Musk announced last month that there were 4.6 million federal government-issued credit cards with a limit of at least $10,000 each. So far, 500,000 of them have been cut up and canceled and listed on the Doge website, just in case anybody who should have one of those cards and should be spending that much of my money can raise his or her hand and complain. The cards were registered to 32 different government agencies, from Defense to the Farm Credit Administration to the spendthrifts at USAID. Of course, these folks are screaming and talking to National Public Radio, who may even have some of the credit cards themselves. NBC reports that there are 11 different lawsuits filed not against the fraudulent spending, but over keeping people's private information private and out of sight, as outlined by the Privacy Act of 1974. Not about fraud, not about saving my money, but whether or not someone not authorized to see Social Security numbers sees Social Security numbers. The legal claims or lawfare appear to try to slow down the search for fraud by any means possible. The Kevin Collier NBC article says that Doge access poses serious risks for Americans. So far, courts have handed up favorable rulings, and the waste cutting and fraud finding continues. Like Willie Sutton said, people rob banks because that's where the money is. Perhaps the same can be said for large non-responsive.
Well, that's quite interesting. And we played that daily dose because it has to do with the Department of Government Efficiency, Doge. And that's the third point that we're going to bring up from President Trump's second inaugural. He announced in that address that he would be creating the Department of Government Efficiency. And Dale Parrish wants to make a comment before we move ahead.
You know, I in my working life, I was involved in administration, managing accounts payable, and the expenses of companies. I can't grasp 4.6 million credit cards out there, each with a $10,000 limit. How in the world? No wonder we've got a debt. How in the world could you manage that? That just blows. And this is not the first time I've heard this. This has been out there before, but all of a sudden it just dawned on me: how in the world can that be controlled?
Well, it wasn't controlled. It wasn't managed.
That's the point, I guess.
That's the whole point. Yes, Brett.
I just did a quick little Google search. There are approximately 3 million federal employees. So there are over 1 million more credit cards issued by the federal government than what we have federal employees. And that's every federal employee. And I'm sure that not every single one of them that gets a credit card, well, maybe. But I would assume that not every single federal employee gets a credit card, but
maybe some of them get two. Maybe some of them get two or more.
I'm sure they do. So
sure.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Well, we need some common sense with regard to government efficiency, and this is right in the wheelhouse of Convention of States, because one of our 3 types of amendments that we want to see to the Constitution is to rein in out of control federal spending. And I got good news for you tonight, folks. David Allen Punt is not just a voice, but he's a real person, and he's right here on the screen in the flesh. And David, would you take it away for the next few minutes and talk to us about the Doge?
I was wondering if you were going to mention that I was a real person as opposed to just another pretty voice. One of the things that that I thought about, and I keep hearing about Doge and all the rest of it. And this is actually at the end of my presentation about Doge, is that the next step is to tell Congress about what Doge has found. But Congress put it there in the first place. I mean, it's not the same guys or same gals, but many of them are. So we're going to tell them what they already know. USAID is the organization that got the most attention so far from what Doge has been doing. The candidates for public office have tried to find and root out waste, fraud, and abuse since at least the days of World War II. Reagan tried to do it and tried to talk about it. Last year's presidential campaign, Donald Trump talked about the idea of putting really brainy guys in charge of modernizing government, finding waste, and saving money. After the election, Trump used an executive order to create the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, and he put Elon Musk in charge of it. Vivek Ramaswamy at one time was supposed to be also in charge of it too, but he ducked out and decided he wanted a private life. Musk hired a number of systems engineers, accountants, green eye shade people, and they started looking using what seems like a combination of artificial intelligence, financial gumshoe work, asking questions, looking at computer programs, and lots of spreadsheets. And Doge began to find stuff. They looked through budgets, lists of payments, contracts, agreements, lots and lots and lots of paperwork. And the first find to get the attention publicity was USAID, United States Agency for International Development. It was originally created by JFK in 1961. The agency was under the State Department and has its roots in the late 1800s when businessmen would offer to go overseas to help foreign countries with technical assistance. The agency was made independent when Congress passed the 1979 Foreign Assistance Act. Since then, USAID has grown like Topsy. Independent-minded bureaucrats in today's modern-day gold rush created NGOs, non-governmental organizations, and discovered all those lucrative contracts to pan out that taxpayer gold. Like Willie Sutton said, the money is actually in government. USA gave money to support electric vehicles in Vietnam, money to a transgender clinic in India, 1.5 million to a Serbian LGBTQ group, 1.5 million to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion in Serbia's workplace, and so much more. I stumbled across a personal example. I didn't really stumble across it, but my church sponsors a mission to a small country in Africa. It's Malawi. And we support a particular village within the country. And the country as a whole, on average, individuals make $2 a year, or $2 a month. It's not quite as bad as $2 a year, but almost. And we when we go over there, we send missionaries over there, and we don't speak the language, Chichewan, of course, and we hire some of the local people to be translators for us. One of the local people is the wife of the founder of the mission, and he works for a government process right now. He works for the president, and she acts as a translator. His sister is also translated for us in other mission trips. We found out earlier this year that she was also being paid by USAID. So she was double dipping. And she sent us an email, sent us a tragic email and a Facebook post and saying, I may be out of work. I may not be able to afford to do this anymore because USAID has canceled my contract. She was getting money? Wow. Only the best known example of what could be called waste and fraud. It's now under Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and he has whittled it down to a fraction of its former size. During testimony at a Senate Foreign Relations Committee on Tuesday last week, Rubio said 12 cents on every dollar spent by USAID reached recipients. 12 cents. 88 cents went to non-government organizations and bureaucrats and people in the middle. All that money was gone. The USAID used to have 10,000 employees. Rubio says now that 294 people will be able to handle the workforce. What else has Doge found? Some of the discoveries don't lead to taxpayer savings, but a better way of keeping records. The Treasury Department revealed what looked like a $4.7 trillion impossibility to trace money. They couldn't find it. They didn't know where it went. They knew it spent it, but they had no idea where it went. Doge revealed that the Treasury Department sometimes didn't include the Treasury account symbol, TAS. It's a tracking code, which made it almost impossible to trace the money because the number wasn't there. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent now says that the code is used on all expenditures. Social Security Administration at one time had listed 12.3 million people aged 120 years of age and older. The ones over 120 now have been marked deceased, thanks to Doge and thanks to Discovery. 1.4 million of them with duplicate birth dates, more than one birthday, are still on the rolls, and they're still being investigated. Doge discovered CMS, the Medicare people, has a 7-year backlog of overbilling investigations by Medicare Advantage plans. Secretary Oz says he'll be caught up by the end of the year. There could be some taxpayer gold there. Some have saved real taxpayer cash. U.S. Department of Labor was paying for 16,800 licenses for phone lines. But in the last month, only 4,000 were used. So the department is canceling the unused phone lines. $500,000 a year savings. In its travel through a variety of agency financial books, Doge found 120 wasteful contracts worth $3.1 billion, and they were all terminated. $3.1 billion savings. Examples of those contracts, $288,000 for culture service, whatever that is, and $4.05 million for technical services in Mozambique. The Census Bureau, in addition to the census, the Bureau does 102 additional surveys that cost $2.2 billion, and nobody knows what they're for. Doge is reviewing them right now, one by one. So far, they've found 5 that are totally wasteful, and they've canceled those surveys. The Postal Service reviewed 8,600 contracts and found just over 1,000 of the contracts not needed. Now, they saved $188.5 million. One of them was a $791,000 contract for negotiating skills training and $100,000 CIO postal union all hands meeting. I'm going to mention again what I said in the piece, that the proof that it's working. Last month, for the first time in years, Treasury has announced that it doesn't need as much money to pay its bills. And they asked for $53 billion less to run the government. And that hasn't happened for a long time. I'd say 20 or 25 years. Doge is also spreading. Some of the software engineers developed a database to maintain voter lists. And Louisiana Secretary of State said this week that they're using the tool to double check registered voters' names to make sure only those eligible can vote or register. Nobody knows why these things just got out of control, and nobody was looking at it. Nobody was checking it. And the blame has to go back to Congress. That's the only place because they're not the ones they're the ones that are not watching it. Now, the second act of Doge that I talked about earlier is to publish its findings in a more readable form, make sure everybody in the world gets a copy. There's a website, of course, www.doge.gov, and you can see day-to-day findings that they're unearthing. Just because Musk is gone doesn't mean the rest of the guys are not working. And then also those who want the second act report everything to Congress, but remember grimly that Congress was the body who created these agencies in the first place. Congress created USAID and all the other places where tax money was going to be tossed. So that's what happens. And if the danger is, if nothing is done to make these changes permanent, they'll come back. Without a permanent fix, maybe a constitutional amendment, that would be the best thing. All the fake bills and all the wasteful spending and all the LGBTQ semicolon Peruvian comic books comes flooding back onto the balance sheet, and we will pay for it once more.
David Allen Punt, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
By the way, he comes to us from the frozen tundra of northern Minnesota. And we're so glad to have you here, David. Thank you.
Glad to be here.
Okay, Dale.
My concern about this is that, just like you said, David, that little is going to be done. That's my concern about this. And I don't know the answer to this, but it seems to me that the Inspector General, the IGs in our government, and I don't know how many there are. I don't know how they operate. It seems to me like they should be the ones uncovering these things all along. But so I'm really concerned. You know, we've all heard this waste, fraud, and abuse for decades. I mean, it's and it just never seems to get done. Never seems to be weeded out. And this is my concern here. This is unbelievable, great work that's being done. And I'm also concerned that if Elon leaves, who's gonna take his place? It's got to be someone strong. It's got to be someone that has a reputation of that fits this job. It seems to me, but I'm really concerned that this as to the future of this effort. Quite honestly,
yeah, I am too. And Bill Proxmire from Wisconsin, he used to have a Turkey of the Week, where he would talk about a government cost overruns, and Tom Coburn from Oklahoma. And
yeah, Tom Coburn. I mean, he published books on this, I believe, every year, didn't he?
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, this is nothing new. Absolutely nothing new. I mean, the government, our government is wasting our money like crazy. And if there's ever a time for self-government to come back into fashion, this is it.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Brett.
Yeah. Well, and Dale, you and David, I mean, bring up great points. Behind every one of those dollars, there's a constituent group, and those constituent groups help get politicians elected. Right. And so this is another indication, another indication that DC is not going to correct what DC has caused, because the incentive structures are completely perverted.
That's
and
true.
The only way that we can do anything, we can right this ship and force the government to be more responsible is through a convention of states.
That's right. That's right.
Yep.
Amen to that, brother.
Yep. It needs a constitutional amendment. Otherwise, we're going to slip right back into corruption. Yep. Yes, indeed. Okay, we're going to move on to the fourth point that the president brought up. The fourth point we're going to consider tonight out of the 10 points that he brought up on restoring common sense. And this time we turn to Ken, who is going to talk about gender. Ken, before you do that, would you tell our audience about that QR code just above Gary's shoulder there in the corner of the screen?
Sure, John. Yeah, the one that Gary's hat is almost ready to cover up. Yeah, he's pointing to. That's our support QR code, and we certainly wish people will go ahead and show their support for what you're hearing tonight and every other Monday night. I appreciate the effort we put into actually bringing this kind of information to the airwaves. Obviously, I think people are understanding that it's not ABC, it's not NBC, it's not MSNBC anymore. It's programs like this that are bringing you what you need to hear. So to show your support, we're asking you go ahead and take your smartphone out, take a clip of that, put your name and your email address in, and join our fun family group of people that are on the platform. getting more information like this from our contributors and other sources that we post there. Free platform. We don't ask for money, don't ask for donations, and we won't come after looking for you. We just so that's all I have to say on that one.
Thank you, Ken.
Yep.
Now, what about gender?
Gender. Well, this is one that in recent years I think everybody is quite aware that extreme ideologies quickly took root in the U.S. K through 12 public schools. And it came about through new school policies, practices, and curriculums. And it all had devastating effects on students. And until recently, Americans have mainly turned a blind eye instead of speaking up against political and social indoctrination that threatens our children's education and the very fabric of our nation. So one radical development is in the area of sex gender. And although the terms are historically used interchangeably, a shift has occurred in recent decades where sex primarily referring to a biological category or anatomy, and gender referring to a person's thinking or feelings about who they are. And over the past several years, schools have increasingly embraced the cultural redefinition of I lost my place here, of male and female to a host of created alternatives. So despite the biological reality of only two distinct sexes formed in the womb and birth, schools embrace, and in some cases actively promote, students questioning and then self-selecting their gender based upon how they feel. So starting as early as preschool and kindergarten, taxpayer money is funding radical sex education content. There's an example I'm going to give that is called the gender unicorn. It's an iteration of the genderbread person, and it's a purple cartoon image featuring hearts and rainbows. Now, it was adopted in 2016 by the Charlotte-Mecklenburg School District in Charlotte, North Carolina. You might have expected that to happen in California, but it actually happened in Charlotte, North Carolina. So gender unicorn use has spread nationwide and into Canada. The Washington State ASCD curriculum in Context Spring-Summer 2020 lists the gender unicorn as one of several educational materials for teachers. The Alberta Teachers Association includes the gender unicorn in their 152-page teacher toolkit aimed at cultivating LGBTQ inclusive classrooms. So the character is designed to look endearing to young children, similar to the popular Barney. I think everybody's familiar with Barney. And however, the unicorn walks students through self-selecting their gender identity, their gender expression, the gender they're physically attracted to, and the gender they're emotionally attracted to. Now, that's a big one, emotionally. Each option includes not only categories such as women, men, and feminine, masculine, but also other. So even their sex assigned at birth is open to interpretation. It includes female and male, but also other and intersex. So according to Eli Sanders, the sexual health and school health specialist for the Oregon School Department of Education, we have more and more kindergartners coming out and identifying. Show young students the purple unicorn and ask them to choose from various options, and you'll undoubtedly receive all sorts of interesting answers. Talk to any 5-year-old for 10 minutes and you will be entertained and likely given misinformation on any number of topics. But without prompting or exposure to these concepts from adults, young students would surely not form the suggested conclusions. Most kindergartners don't know how to read, tie their shoes, or recite their home address. But instead of teaching the academic basics, schools are now actively promoting identity confusion, emotional harm, and insecurity. Negative impacts that last a lifetime. So it's no wonder that child and adolescent mental health issues are on a steep rise when students are taught to question their own identity and select from an ever-growing list of confusing options. Meanwhile, parents, well, they're widely uninformed about what's occurring in classrooms related to this material. For example, a concerned parent of a second-grade student in Oregon reached out to the teacher after her child was exposed to the genderbread person without any prior communication. Tragically, the teaching of gender identity and fluidity and other LGBTQ concepts in social studies and science often come with no warning or option for parents to opt their students out. Her concerns were dismissed, and the request for a meeting with the teacher to discuss was denied. Instead, the teacher directed the parent to the principal, who responded that gender identity is something that our society historically has failed to talk about, and declared it a positive development that students are being taught about this topic now. So it reaches into the administration, not just teachers, that's for sure. Furthermore, the principal stated that gender identity teaching could occur throughout the school year in all subject areas. Now, that's important. I'll tell you why in a second. Now, while Oregon allows opt-out in health classes, the principal reminded the parent that the opt-out option does not apply to non-health classes. A workaround. So this deceptive strategy by the school evidently meets the letter of the law by providing parent communication and opt-out privileges regarding sensitive health content. However, it clearly violates the spirit of the law and circumvents the parental control over the indoctrination of their children. President Trump signed a sweeping executive order on his first day in office, and he was recognizing only two sexes, male and female, and he directed federal agencies to cease promotion of the concept of gender transition. Now, the order which Trump signed from the Oval Office is part of a broader campaign promise to rid the nation of what he has called transgender insanity. Reverse diversity and inclusion initiatives instituted by the Biden administration. Now, I want to conclude with a warning to people out there that might be listening, or to those that might see this on a recorded version. Genesis 1:27 says God created man in his image, and he created male and female. And I want to remind people that although the perception is that this is a very small percentage of our population, I can tell you that I have personal experience from a wing of my own family that has a 7-year-old. I won't mention the sex. I'll just say there's a 7-year-old that is being allowed to dress in the opposite sex that the person actually is. 7 years old, and being put on social media pages and using the pronoun he or she to talk about the particular event that the person is in, or the particular portion of what they're doing in reference to this person. And I can tell you this is very hard on the heart. It's very hard on families that know that down the line, a lot of mental issues, a lot of suicide, a lot of other destructive things. Like I know some of these kids actually turn to hurting themselves, cutting themselves with knives, this type of stuff, when they get to a point of such confusion that that is caused because of the fact that they've gotten the wrong parental guidance. And that's what this really comes down to. As parents, this needs to be taught in your home. It needs to be taught, and it needs to be shown by example. So the man of the house has to dress like a man of the house. The man of the house has to go do the things that man was created to do. And on the other side of things, the woman of the house teaches the female people, sibling or people in her family, what it is to be a woman. And God created us differently, and for that reason, to be able to manage a household in the way that is respected and brings honor to God. And that's basically all I have on the gender issues, gentlemen.
Ken, thank you very much. This is a very serious issue, and it needs to be taken seriously. And thank you for that warning. Dale?
I still say this all goes back to Marxism, communism, and the elimination of the family unit. I think it's all tied together, and I mean I do firmly believe this was first brought to this country through our universities, and it has over time. It's changed over time, and but the intent, the overall intent, still is the destruction of the family unit, and I believe we've got to get to control of this. We got to get control of this. That's all there is to it.
Strong point. Thank you, Dale. Appreciate that. Well, Dale is actually our next presenter. The fifth and final point that we're going to talk about from the president's inaugural address was that he said that he would begin immediately to restore common sense regarding justice for members of the military service. Dale, your turn.
All right. Thank you, John. Well, I can recall just a couple years ago, it seems to me, I can recall attending a hearing at our state capitol in Indianapolis, and it was on COVID-19. It was on the mandates, the vaccines, and the mandates, and what was going to be happening in Indiana, and what had happened in Indiana. And I listened to the heartbreaking, I'm telling you, the heartbreaking testimonies from numerous ladies from the nursing industry that had lost their jobs because they refused to take the vaccine at the time. And now these were people with over 20 years of nursing experience, be it in pediatrics, being whatever field, and these people lost their jobs because they refused to take a vaccine. And so when John put this topic up as to Trump's restoring common sense with this, as it pertains to our service members, this really caught my attention. And if you all remember this happening during the Biden administration, the COVID-19 vaccine mandates led to the discharge of approximately 8,000 service members in our country. 8,000 people. Many just objected on religious or personal grounds. Okay. Terrible thing. However, the Trump administration is taking action to try and correct this situation. Now, just for your information, a breakdown of that 8,000 service members that were discharged. 3,400 came from the Army, 1,600 from the Navy, 2,000 from the Air Force, and 2,000 from the Marine Corps. So interesting. I don't know. I guess the Army is the largest branch of our military. I assume that's the case. That's probably why their numbers are 3,400. But that's a breakdown of how that came about. Well, in January 27th, 2025, Trump signed an executive order to restore service members that were discharged solely due to the refusing to take the vaccine. And this restoration would include full back pay and benefits and a reinstatement of the individual's previous rank and pay grade. Now, some of these, we're talking about years being out of the military, and obviously to be restored to your previous rank and with back pay, this could be a lot of money to these individuals. So that was the deal that was put forth by Trump. And now to be eligible to take advantage of this, this would, of course, apply to any active duty as well as reserve personnel, because I guess there were people even in the reserves, if they refused to take the vaccine, they were discharged. So voluntary separations must provide sworn attentions or sworn affidavits. And now voluntary returnees are not entitled to back pay, but if they were discharged, other than voluntary, this is what they were eligible to get. Surprisingly, very few have taken advantage of this so far. Of course, we're early on here, but so far, only, and I'm not sure what date. I think this was through April of this year, but only 73 Army people have returned. Only 25 in the Marine Corps, 13 in the Air Force, and only 2 in the Navy. Now, evidently, there's quite a few that have expressed some interest in doing this, but in returning, but they haven't done so as far. So I find this. I don't know. I don't know if this is just a huge mistrust of the government and what's going to happen if they come back in. I don't know. I don't know why the numbers are so low, quite honestly. However, this offer does go on, and as a matter of fact, the offer is valid through April 1st of 2026. So we got a whole nother year to go on this. And of course, there's an ongoing effort to reach out to these people. So the what is the potential there for hundreds to return? We'll see. But I just find that very interesting. Again, it was heartbreaking to see all the individuals that day down in Indianapolis, of all the people that were forced out of their jobs. And I don't know, maybe some of you already know, do you know, or have healthcare positions been offered again to people that had been discharged? I don't know. But
Don't know.
I certainly hope so. But anyway, that's John. That's the status. That's where we stand on this particular point of service members that were discharged from the military.
Okay, David.
And you bring it up on Memorial Day.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we're going to revisit Memorial Day when we have a closing video from Marengo Mike, so be sure to stay tuned a couple more minutes to hear that. You know, Dale, I wonder if a lot of these unjustly treated service members are waiting to see if the left files any lawsuits and how the courts rule on it. Because if I'm already involved in if I found a good job, a good career 3-4 years ago after getting unjustly discharged from the military, I'm not going to easily turn my back on that if I think some court might rule this thing unconstitutional for some crazy reason. So maybe they're waiting, and they have almost another full year.
Yeah, could be
before they have to say yes to the deal. But Dale, that's a great summary of how Trump is restoring common sense to our treatment of military personnel.
Yep.
Well, friends, this brings us to the end of this month's roundtable. Before we close it out, I want to give you our email address. If you have any questions at all about Convention of States, please email them to us at this address, raiseyourvoicecos@gmail.com. Again, that's raiseyourvoicecos@gmail.com. I want to invite you to be sure to tune in next Monday, which will be June the 2nd at 7 p.m. Eastern for our next Convention of States Today, where we're going to look at media bias. And how are you going to do that in an hour, Dale? There's so much bias out there. And After that, we've got one on June the 9th that we had. Yeah. Why the Convention of States has not already been ratified by 20 or more states. We're still kind of stuck at 19 states. And so we're going to open the book on that one on June the 9th. And our next Convention of States Today Roundtable is on June 23rd at 7 p.m. Eastern, and we'll figure out the topic between now and then. And I want to show you episode number 17 of a series that I made called COS Basics, and it's on the fact that Congress decides the details. John Ackerman for Convention of States, Indiana. In my ongoing series on COS Basics, I'm having some fun busting myths. And this myth says that Congress will decide how votes are cast and how votes are counted. Congress, not the convention. This myth goes on to say that this will look a lot like the Electoral College, where big states get a lot of votes, like California and New York, and little states get 3 votes. That's the minimum. Well, the fact is that neither Congress's power to call the convention nor its necessary and proper powers from Article 1 can be used to prescribe how votes will be counted. We know from history and from precedent that all states will be given equal voting strength because a convention of states is a meeting of equal sovereigns. By the way, remember that a lot of what I'm saying is found on conventionofstates.com on the web, so you can get more details and even sources backing up what I'm saying. Call a convention does not mean control a convention. And a review of the founding era convention calls reveals that the power to call a convention is limited to specifying the time, place, and purpose for the convention. Founding era calls did not try to control the composition, rules, or conduct of the convention. All they did was designate the time, place, and purpose. It's a fact that Congress may not use its necessary and proper powers to control the convention. The necessary and proper clause of the Constitution applies only to the powers enumerated in Article 1, Section 8. In a court case called Idaho versus Freeman, the courts held that Congress's power to participate in the amendment process stems solely from Article 5. Question comes up, why equal voting? Because a convention of states is a meeting of equal sovereigns. States at a convention would each have the same voting strength, similar to the way member countries in NATO or the United Nations have equal voting strength. One nation, one vote, one state, one vote. And it's always been that way. Every interstate convention that's ever been held in America was one state, one vote. There is one exception to this. It was a convention in the late 1800s where each state got 8 votes. But even in that case, no state had greater voting strength than any other state. Think about the founders' intent. We know what the founders intended from the ratification debates: one state, one vote, and majority rules at the convention. And so the myth that Congress must decide how votes are cast and counted, busted. Boy, that guy, whoever he is, busted that myth, didn't he? Well, now to close us out, here's that promised video of Marengo Mike on Memorial Day.
we celebrate Memorial Day with barbecues and gatherings and beautiful scenes like this at our beaches. This is what their beaches look like. The brave heroes that sacrificed all for the freedoms we now enjoy. Freedom isn't free. The volunteers of Convention of States express our gratitude in remembering those who paid the ultimate price.